First-time home buyers have no idea what the process looks like. And instead of a needy, pushy realtor telling you how it goes, I want to give you a real-life rendition with starring my beautiful now wife, who was only my fiance when we were going through the process, Kaity McKee.
Is that weird for you to say?
That is weird. It's in my phone now, but
I like it.
anyways, we're going to walk you through the process from start to finish and add in there the different hangups or what took longer, what maybe took shorter, a less amount of time than what she was expecting, and give it from the perspective of someone who's not in the real estate world. And then I'll be able to interject my experience in the real estate world, because this is actually my 6th property closing on 2023. This is filmed in January 2024, and we closed December 2023. So you're getting kind of two perspectives of this one. So to start you off, Kaity, what was the pre-approval process like?
I think the pre-approval process was actually the longest part, which made the whole thing easier, because the lender that you work with does a really good job of making sure all the documents are in order before you go into even making an offer on a house. So for me, I just sent in my documents to them, and then there was no hangups in the process later on when we were trying to get the actual loan approval. So I think sometimes people might be a little intimidated by that or annoyed by it, because like right off the bat, they're sending all their W-2s and all their tax, all this stuff that takes a while, but that actually saved money and time in the long run.
Oh, for sure. Well, saving the money is just because our lender was, or your lender was really creative towards the end there. And we'll get there. So stay to the end to hear the top secret way that we ended up closing with 3.999% interest rate. What my lender does that's different than everybody else, one, they're a lending broker instead of a retail lender. And what that does is a retail lender only has one product to sell you and one company that they sell through. A broker can go through a gamut of different lenders that they can get different credits, or, basically they get the lenders to compete against each other. So you can get a better rate just because it's competition in the market. Another thing they do is they do a pre-approval or a pre-underwriting. So they send everything through underwriting. So before you even have to go through the underwriting process, that's typically at the end of the buying process or the escrow process. They do that up front, so there's no surprises, which is really important, because I went through 6 lenders before I landed on this one that I feel really confident. I can't actually advocate for any one over the other, but I tell people that I set my own mother and I do all my stuff through this lender. That's all I tell them. I give them a wide variety of options and just say, this is the one that I used.
Yeah.
And tell them why. But I do not advocate for one lender over the other.
Yeah.
So keep me out of YouTube jail.
Yeah. Legally. Yeah. I do feel like, from like my limited knowledge though, that could make a big difference, because I can't imagine how frustrating it would be to go through the whole process of making an offer and you kind of get excited for a certain house, and then at the very end of the whole thing, you've taken maybe a month of working on something and you just like can't get the loan.
Yeah, and you totally hit on it. And even more so, it can cost you money. Meaning, like, one of my clients, the one that I went mountain biking with the other day, he went through this process before with one of the lenders that I first started working with. And because they didn't do the underwriting process in the beginning, they ended up finding something that he didn't even know was on his credit. And that killed the deal, which it was too far. It was the week before he was closing. Too far through the process, and he ended up losing his earnest money. So he lost $5,000.
That's a big chunk of change. Like, I don't think anybody would be happy about that.
No, especially when it wasn't something their fault.
Yeah.
It's just from not getting through or not looking at all the documentation. And then after that, you picked out your house pretty quick.
Yeah. Literally, we were on Zillow. I think it was like the day we got engaged or something. And we were just looking on Zillow because I have chickens and you have German Shepherds. So we needed something to combine them without them like killing each other.
Not combine the dogs and the chickens, but allow them to coexist.
Yeah, without any massacres. Yeah, so I was on Zillow, and you gave me the advice of like look for a certain number of bedrooms, four bedrooms, because of just your knowledge on home value and like rental value and stuff.
Exactly. That just for renting a 4-bedroom compared to a 3-bedroom, 4 bedrooms rent a higher rate in between. The delta between a 3-bedroom and a 4-bedroom is much higher than a 4-bedroom and a 5-bedroom, or a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
So you get way more bang for your buck for that, not that much more as a purchasing. So just for future thinking, turning that into an investment later in life.
That actually surprised me too. Like that was the first point in this process where you told me something and I kind of in my head was like, I don't really need 4 bedrooms, you know, like we definitely don't need 4 bedrooms, but I just kind of trusted your opinion on it because of the information you gave me. And I think it worked out really well. So there's a lot of stuff like that that I would definitely have done differently. Like I probably would have done like 2 or 3 bedrooms. Like why do I need 4 bedrooms, you know?
Right.
But that led us to this property that's on an acre. It has a chicken coop. It has like a dog run, a beautifully renovated house.
It's really like the perfect house for us in our lifestyle. Which normally in this, just to interject, like as a realtor, what I would do is I would set up what we call a drip. And basically I would, on my website, I would take the listings from the MLS, which we get it a little bit before Zillow typically. So immediately when I get a hit of what my client wants, it just sends out those listings to them. But you were very proactive and just jumped on Zillow, which is fine. Like I use Zillow to find deals when I'm looking at other parts of the country to invest in.
Yeah. So I think that that's another point where if it was just up to me, I would have not ever landed on this house. But that is where the right realtor really comes into play because they might have information that would be valuable in the future. And I think you had the opposite experience with your house that you built, right? Like you actually...
Before I was a realtor, and my realtor gave me the advice of the certain floor plan that I was building, he said it looks better as a 3-bedroom, which I took that advice. But now that I know what I know, like for the value of the home and the amount of money that it would have cost me to add that extra bedroom, like that's something when I go to refinance that house, I'm going to build the 4th bedroom before I do that, just because it's going to net me another $20,000. But that's the difference between going with a realtor and going with an investor. I invest in my own properties and I buy my own properties as an investment for future wealth and for generational wealth. So I always advise people when you're looking for a realtor, because everybody has a realtor or everybody has like a family member who's a realtor or a family friend who's a realtor. Do not go with a realtor who doesn't own their own primary residence.
True.
Or use their residence as an investment. And even if you don't want to get into the investment, still having the option to buy another home and keep yours as a primary or keep yours as an investment property, that's like converting that. Or if you think about it, when you go to sell, if you have a property that could be used as an investment property, you just opened up the market that you can sell to, because you can sell to investors and you can also sell to people who want a single family home or a primary residence.
Yeah, we definitely saw that in this whole process. I mean, obviously I trust you because of our relationship anyways, but I can't imagine having like some budget realtor that didn't really do all the stuff you did, because it was very evident in this deal that it really matters, like who is doing the negotiating for you and if they know what they're doing and all these different things. Like I think it kind of could be a nightmare if you just think, oh, I want to save on commission, you know, and just have my mom be my realtor or whatever. Like, unless your mom is really good realtor. Like
I'm sure there are some moms out there that are also very good realtors. So moving on to the process, we picked out the home. I really want to touch on what it was like to get that home actually under contract.
We went and toured the house, made an offer pretty quickly. They had already dropped the price $70,000. I think.
Yeah, they just did it another $35,000, but from when they listed it was $70,000.
Yeah, so I think we went in at full ask because it was a reasonable price, I think. And then they didn't have any other offers because right now everybody has this mindset that rates are horrible, like don't buy a house right now. But that was really good for us because it's kind of the perfect conjunction of home prices are lower than they were like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And then there's not competition because everybody's afraid of like these crazy rates.
Right.
Which actually, like, I don't know if this is true. Maybe you can confirm, but I heard that like the rates were artificially lowered during COVID. And that's not what they normally are. And then like 5% is actually pretty normal. We're just used to like 2 or 3% or whatever it was.
The 2 to 3% home loans was very, very low. And that we'll probably never see that again in our lifetimes. Like in the 80s, interest rates were 13 to 18%.
Yeah.
The thing is homes were $35,000 back then. So now it's like a crux of homes will always be more expensive in 10 years than they were 10 years in the past, or at least they have been in all of human history. So interest rates, like a healthy interest rate typically sits around inflation. I think we're going to probably settle around 4% for the foreseeable future when we get the dip, and then they'll fluctuate. But the Federal Reserves use interest rates, and it doesn't directly correlate with home interest rates, but they raise them up and down to combat inflation. And honestly, with what's going on and what we predicted, right now the Federal Reserves look like they're about to stick this landing, where they're going to be able to squash inflation by lowering the interest rates. Sorry, not squash inflation. The U.S. economy has been very, very strong. Like jobs have been growing even through this recession that we've been seeing. And recession, depending on how you define it, I might get canceled for this. For a very, very long time, it was 2 quarters that were, dip or trended down. We hit that, and then coincidentally, just the definition, the government decided to define a recession a different way after that.
Well, rules for me, not for me. That's the government.
Interest rates will affect the price of your home. Sorry, the price of the mortgage payment more than anything else. Right now, being able to get into a home I think it's a very powerful thing to negotiate now rather than later, because we hit that. I mean, when interest rates were low, you had to pay $50,000 over asking.
And that's where we saw the craziness of like people had like 4 offers the day that they put it on the market.
Or even, I mean, days on market were like averaging at 3 days, 3 days on market, and people were getting under contract before, but they were coming in $50,000 over asking. When you do that, it won't appraise for that price because the homes that are closed haven't closed in that amount of time. So you have to come up with $50,000 cash to do for the delta between what you offered and what it actually appraised for, because the bank isn't going to give you money, isn't going to lend you $550,000 if the home's only worth $500,000. So right now you can actually get into a home, but people are worried about their monthly payment, which I understand. That's, it's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. The thing is the 30-year mortgage is the greatest hedge against inflation known to man, because you get to lock in your housing prices for 30 years. I guarantee anybody who's been renting for 30 years is renting at a higher price than they were before, unless they're renting from like their father or their mother. Somebody
rent control is like not really a thing anymore.
Well,
unfortunately,
it shouldn't necessarily be a thing, but even where rent control is a thing, it's typically 9 or 10%. So every year your rent could be raised by 9 to 10%.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's
so it still goes up.
Yeah, in like Portland or California, areas like that.
Wow. So we actually did get in a really good time right now then, because we didn't have to battle because the inventory is still the same. It's still less than what people want to buy.
Well, yeah, the inventory is super low.
Right.
But also days on market are very long, which typically that doesn't happen because buyers are not motivated to buy right now. And sellers, inventory is so low because sellers don't need to sell.
Yeah.
A lot of sellers have a 2 to 3% interest rate, and they can just
they're happy to sit there, which you can't blame them. But if someone does want to sell their house, and we obviously have people that want to buy a house, I think a lot of the buyers are just really afraid because they're like, oh, I can't do an 8% interest rate or whatever. But it's like we got what, 3.9?
Yeah,
So
3.9.
there's some ways around it.
Mhm.
I just don't think people are aware of it.
Yeah, that 3.9 was after the buy down, which is the tip in the end, just to so
Yeah.
the comment section doesn't get crazy of like, you're lying.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
we're not.
really got it.
After a specific buy down. You mentioned that we offered asking price.
Yeah.
But that's because we wanted more leverage in the deal, and I ended up asking for 3% seller concessions. And a seller concession, if you don't know, that's just where the seller gives you the money that you give them, essentially. So the bank, you close on the house, the bank gives them a check, but withholds whatever the concession is, and typically in percentage. So the house that we got under contract was a $500,000 house, and we asked for 3% seller concessions. They came back with 2% seller concessions, which we conceded to because I don't like to make the first. And this is kind of just a negotiation tip. You can send this out to your realtors or whatnot, but I like to leave a lot of leverage in the deal. So later on in the deal, we can ask for more essentially, and the buyer or the sellers don't make it. They don't start feeling like they're being mistreated,
which is exactly what you ended up doing at the end. So it worked out kind of exactly how you expected it to.
So the seller concessions that we asked for ended up being right around $10,000. And what that did was allow us to pay for the rate buy down. And I'll talk about that later.
We bought you a house, Mr. Burger Ranch.
Yeah. Talk through the inspection.
Okay, so honestly,
actually, let's go back from the walkthrough
okay, like when we initially viewed the property, or
yes,
okay.
Yeah, let's go through the walkthrough and because there was this is another hot tip about picking an investor and somebody that actually buys real estate for themselves versus just a realtor, because I think that I definitely handled it differently than most realtors would, and that's why this specific property wasn't selling, because we bought it for far under market value, and I was able to see that because I understand this one thing.
Okay, so initial walkthrough, obviously we liked the property, the kitchen and bathrooms and everything are updated. The downstairs, we had a couple things where we were like, it just didn't seem like they had gotten this property ready to sell. Like a couple little things like outlet covers that needed to be replaced. Patches that needed to be done in the paint.
Yeah, they took the renovations, they took the like 95% and then left the little creepy stuff.
Yeah.
Which makes the property view very poorly.
Yes.
Because there was exposed wire.
And I don't know if this is like a woman thing too, but like when I walk into a house, I want to like visualize my life there. And if it's like gross in certain places, I'm kind of like, like I don't really have an emotional connection to this house. So, but the kitchen and the bathrooms are a big thing. So those being updated, I was like, yeah, okay. And it was on an acre in the middle of Boise, which is insane. So it also, like the big draws on the house were the backyard has like a full garden. There's a greenhouse. There's like a little running fountain pond thing.
Yeah.
And this was in the middle of winter. So all of that just looked kind of gross.
Yeah.
But in the summer, it's all going to be blooming sunflowers and all this other stuff. So I think the other piece of advice that you gave me was like, we can literally fix these things for hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
And, we can paint the downstairs. We can cover an outlet. But I think that is another reason that this house wasn't moving as much, is because the sellers just weren't in a place in their life that they could put the time and money into that.
100%. And a great tip for realtors, if you have a client who's looking at a bunch of properties, or not even looking at them, but they're just going through properties and they're kind of hesitant, get the wife to walk through the house. When the wife walks through the house, she'll imagine herself in the home, like you said, and it'll make buying it like real. And then when you're walking through, you can start asking questions that lead them to imagine themselves and their children in that home. That's something that I picked up from one of my mentors. So when we were walking through, I specifically knew your loan product, which we put on the offer to begin with. So the seller also knows your loan product. The exposed wiring and whatnot, which was just like a cover. It wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
But I knew that was something that would deter most people, but that also would deter a bank from lending to you. So the appraiser would require that get fixed.
Yeah.
which that comes up later in the deal.
Yeah.
So on the back end, when it was agent to agent, I got the $10,000 concession. They were at rock bottom. They didn't want to deal with that
Yeah.
property anymore. They just wanted $500,000 offer, and then that was it.
Yeah.
They were like threatening to repost it in spring. So I told the realtor, like, listen, this is what we're gonna do. Well, I'm not gonna say as is, but we see all of the things that need to get fixed. My client wants $10,000 credit to go towards closing costs and the rate buy down. She's willing to do all of that stuff. So we're going to do the inspection for information purposes only. And we're not really concerned about what the inspection report comes back with. And we just want this to have an easy deal.
Which is totally true.
Yeah.
Like we were totally okay with the little cosmetic things that we saw, but your experience told you like that this on a home inspection is going to be something that has to be fixed.
Yeah. Not the appraisal.
On the appraisal.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
During the inspection, we go through the inspection and there was a couple things that came up that we did address. And, even though the inspection report was super long because all the creepy stuff, it actually like the roof was in great condition and the inspection report came back great. In my mind, but there was a couple like creepy things about water intrusion, and that was the one thing that I hit on. It was a very low cost to fix it, but it was a high risk to leave it done. So I went and I explained that to the agent. The agent conceded, like, yes, this is a couple $100 fix, and we don't want water to intrude in the home. So that was an obvious one. And again, like I came to you and I suggested that we don't address all this stuff that we wanted to get fixed because I knew that the appraisal was going to address that.
Yeah.
And at this point we had a well inspection, and the well inspection was of it, or the production test of it was like, could not be better. But there's arsenic leaking in that, and the fix for that is just a reverse osmosis machine or system. So we ended up, the deal I made was I would buy that for closing kiss. Ooh. That's my closing kiss. Reverse osmosis filtration system as a closing gift, and I had the seller install it.
Yeah.
Or have their handyman install it. So that was another concession that we got, and I used that by me injecting. I was going to get her a closing gift anyways. I mean, it's my property, but even in a real situation, I would have gotten her a closing gift anyways, and that was well within the
range,
the appropriate closing gift. And this was just a way to show good faith to the sellers and to the agent, like, hey, I'm going to contribute to making a solution to this. And the whole time, the reason why I do things like that is it's my prerogative and the listing agent's prerogative to make our clients' sale or transfer of the property as seamless and easy.
Excuse me.
Oh, bless you.
That's a big one.
Yeah, she's allergic to bullshit. As seamless as possible, which is that's our job. Like once we're in contract, the listing agent and the selling agent should really work together to make everyone's life easier. Like it's not us opposing each other; it's us working towards each other. But showing that good faith is also putting more leverage, injecting leverage into the deal, because it's like now I have skin in the game, and I'm just a realtor,
right?
And I have skin in the game before we even close, so I'm giving the seller a closing gift until they close on the property.
Yeah, because we could end up not closing on it, and then they already have that problem fixed out of your pocket in the future.
Exactly.
So that was a nice move.
Yeah, and at that point we get to the appraisal, and because your loan product ended up switching off, and that was some drama that the lender could not foresee.
Yeah.
And that has to do with, the VA, the government being the government. So the drama was there. Our appraisal ended up getting backed up like to the last moment.
Yeah.
Which our solution for that is just, and then there's the rent back thing.
Yeah.
And, like,
I think from my perspective, like I have moved a lot in my life. And when we initially made the offer, like I'm pretty low drama with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was a good decision. Like you thought it was a good decision. Where I started to get like the anxiety building is, through that whole process, because I think you have done this before, so you're just like, this is what happens. But to any other first-time home buyers, it's like there's going to be a process of a whole list of stuff that comes back that's wrong with the house.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be back and forth on how you're going to get approved for the loan. And I think for me and maybe other buyers, that's where you start getting like this whole feeling of like, what's going on and like, why they're keeping problems. And it just starts to give you anxiety.
Yeah.
So now looking back, I'm like, that honestly probably pretty normal. And like, I should have just chilled out a little bit, but that is.
Got it on camera. I feel like Ashton Kutcher's going to jump out of the
But I think from your perspective, that was all normal stuff that like, we have to do this appraisal, things will be wrong. We're going to have to do an inspection, you know.
So, I mean, a part of that drama was the VA. You didn't actually qualify for the VA loan, but to the best, I mean, I learned something during this. And I'm not a lender, like, shocker, or like, asterisk, I am not a lender. Oh, also, this is not financial advice to keep me honest. But so that was something that I didn't foresee. That's something that even your lender couldn't foresee.
We were all kind of shocked by that.
The way that, like you just fell in between the cracks because of how your service.
Between the guard and active duty, it like just, even though I was on active duty for years, it like just fell through, which it was kind of disappointing for all of us because that would have been good.
Just nothing we could have foreseen within reason. That was drama that is very, very uncommon.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that I hadn't seen before. Where having a really good lender is important because our lender had a solution in mind that was a product I didn't even know about. And the appraisal came back. And now the difference between a home inspection, a well inspection, and the appraisal is the home inspection just goes through the property itself. The well, if there's an additional well or if there's an additional septic tank, you just have to send another inspector out or an inspector that's qualified to do that too, and typically just an additional cost. The appraisal is the inspection, essentially, that the lender sends out, and they go through the property and they evaluate the property to make sure that it's a property that they want to lend the purchase or the amount of money that it's going to take to close on the house to make sure that it's worth it, because you don't want to offer somebody $10 billion and get the bank to lend $10 billion on a property that's only worth $350,000. You know, so the appraisal comes back, and that's when it came back at value, but with concessions, which just means it says, yes, this property is worth this, but only if you do these things. And that's where we got all the fixes that we wanted.
That was super smart.
Which I don't even feel bad about this with the listing agent, because she disclosed to me that she not only had a brokerage at one point. A broker just means it's the top spot of a brokerage, and she had a bunch of realtors working underneath her, essentially.
You just feel like that was something that she, as a realtor who's experienced, should have told her clients.
With 30 years of real estate experience, allegedly. And she said her husband was an appraiser. So I don't think that there was any reason why she shouldn't have seen what I was able to see and tell you, hey, just have the appraisal.
In one walkthrough,
which was nice because the leverage there, I was already in the deal. We had the back and forth, so I got to pull that leverage out through negotiation tactics. But the real leverage was making the appraiser the bad guy. Of like, hey, we're using, because the drama there was they wanted to do the fixes, or they had to do the fixes for us to sell a house, but they wanted us to use the concessions that you were already given. And our concessions was going to be used for the 2-1 buy down, which we will talk about that later, because that was like a freaking superpower.
It was awesome.
Closing this deal. So the leverage is making a common enemy, being the appraiser, of like, hey, making the appraiser the common enemy, saying, this isn't our ass. You know, we were happy with the property.
Which is honestly true.
Which is true.
We didn't care. We can go buy like switch covers at Home Depot, you know?
Yeah, exactly. For 88 cents. Because I've done it before. But saying the appraiser is asking for this, all the money that we're using is accounted for through cost and through the 2-1 buy down. Which the 2-1 buy down, I guess we'll talk about that now. Something that our lender came up with. It's a product that was fairly new, and that's how they're combating this craziness that is our the crazy high interest rates. And also interest rates have been trending down. So we happen to close with a 5.99% interest rate,
Yeah.
which is really good. Like how you felt about the 2-1 buy down.
Yeah. So originally when our lender gave us the numbers, so it was 5.99 is what we got.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a 5.99.
Okay. So either way,
yeah, what we closed with was lower than the numbers that he used because he's always conservative.
Yeah.
And this is another point, like always run your numbers conservatively. Don't promise or don't suggest that a client is going to get a better price or a lower number than they is realistic.
That was helpful to me because then
you saw at the closing table.
Yeah, you want your expectations to be higher than like I expect to pay more than what I actually did.
Exactly.
Like good bit, So I think a lot of the stress for me as a buyer was like just looking at that monthly payment. And especially like my rent is really good right now, blah, blah, blah. And I was going to step into a house and I'm happy to be buying a house, but you still look at that monthly payment and you're like, that's a lot,
Yeah, it's sticker shock for sure.
Right. So that was something that I definitely experienced. And that buy down took the monthly payment down, I think $600 a month. So that really helps, especially for like the first year, just kind of getting used to your new financial situation. And then maybe you need to buy something for the house when you move in or whatever. So I really liked that idea of the buy down. And the thing that you were saying, which is really interesting to me, is I think it was like $10,000 to buy that down. But if you were to buy a house that was like $10,000 more, it's not going to make that much of a difference on the monthly payment compared to the buy down.
So what you're saying is the delta, like we closed on this house at $500,000 and we used $10,000 to pay for the buy down. If you instead put that $10,000 to the purchase price and you purchased it at $490,000, your monthly payment would adjust about $50 a month.
Yeah.
The $10,000 that you used did a couple things. So this is what a 2-1 buy down was. It gives you 2 points for the first year, lowers your interest rate by 2 points for the first year, and then at the second year, it lowers it by 1 point. So that first year, it takes $600 off a month. The second year, it takes off $300 a month for the purchase price of our property. The magic pill of the 2-1 buy down is essentially when you just buy down a rate, you can buy down a rate and lower your monthly payment for the entire term of the loan. That product doesn't make sense right now because we know we're going to want to refinance. And with that, when you do, like, let's say we put $10,000 into a rate buy down, that would buy down our rate by about a couple $100 without the 2-1 buy down. And the thing is you have to account for how many months is it going to take for you to pay yourself back. So how many months does it take to make $10,000 from the $200?
Yeah.
So it would take about 4 years for us to get to the point where we paid ourselves back that $10,000. And the Federal Reserve says that they're going to be lowering rates 3 to 6 times next year, being actually this year, 2024. So we know we're going to have an opportunity to refinance the house. So we don't want that money. We don't want to just lose that money because you don't get that back.
Yeah.
You just have to refinance, and then that money, you paid it to the bank to lower your rate. So what a 2-1 buy down does is it puts that money into a separate account essentially, and it pays the difference of what your rate or what your mortgage would be at a 5.99% interest rate and what it is at a 3.99% interest rate. So this one is $600 a month. It pays that difference. But what happens is if in, let's say, 6 months, the rate drops down to a 4.25, and you're like, I would like to keep that for 30 years. You can take the money from the 2-1 buy down. Dang it, Jay. You guys got shook. You can take the money in that escrow account and apply it for your refinance, your refi. So you can essentially refi for free. So the seller's concessions paid for a lower interest rate and the ability to refi in the future.
So that is like the big workaround on the crazy rates right now.
Right.
Which is like a really good idea. And I think that helped a lot with this whole process.
And especially when you think about what sellers care about the most in the deal
Hmm.
is the purchase price. Like,
Yeah.
they want their price. They think that's what their property is worth.
Yeah.
But we know that taking the seller concessions, you can do more with seller concessions than you can with meaning
Mhm.
the money is the money goes a lot further with seller concessions because you can pay for your closing costs, which in the circumstance for you, like you paid for your closing costs, you paid for the rent buy down, and then you actually paid for your taxes all the way through 2024
Yeah.
and halfway through 2025 because you had so much concessions left over that that would have gone back to the seller if you didn't use it for something.
Yeah. I love that for me.
Yeah. So now talk about closing and the surprise you got at closing. It was actually the day before closing.
So that was another part of this that you guys did a really good job on is quote me the highest possible number that I will be paying in this deal. Because if I can stomach that and be okay with it, then I'm super happy when it's $5,000 less
Yeah.
at the closing table, which is kind of what happened. Like I think that the lender gave me a number that was almost $5,000 less when we went to close.
Yeah, I think it was a little over $5,000, but
I feel as if I have to tell you, do not put that on the internet. Nothing about you.
What the escrow company does is they balance the closing disclosure, which is showing you all of the costs from the seller and from you and how those prices, and they use the real prices of like taxes for the amount that they already paid for like utilities or whatnot that they already paid. What the lenders do is they average at a higher rate, or what we say is a conservative. So you can expect a lower amount at closing, but we don't necessarily brief our clients that because we want them to be pleasantly surprised rather than the other way of showing up to closing and thinking, I have to bring an additional $4,000 that I wasn't planning on.
Under promise and over deliver.
Exactly.
That's what I always say.
And then the closing was great and we made out and then we got mimosas afterwards.
Yeah, the closing was really good. It was like literally just go sign the paperwork. I think all the work was done before that. Brought my money, did a wire transfer, which was super easy. That was another thing that I didn't know is like the wire transfer wasn't going to happen until that day.
Yeah.
And I've never done a wire transfer. So I was like, it's just going to take like 48 hours.
No.
And it didn't. It was super easy.
The lender and the title company that I typically use, the way that they do it is they kind of front load all the work so they can fund and record the same day, which funding is just the transfer of the money. Recording is with the actual county saying this no longer is owned by this person and is now owned by this person.
Which is kind of exciting.
Yeah. And when it's recorded, that's when you can actually pick up your keys.
Yeah.
Except for in our case, because we did the rent buyback, which because we got the lower rate, you ended up making like $200 on that, right?
Yeah, the seller wanted to rent back for a month. Initially, they wanted to rent back at their mortgage rate, which is like kind of ridiculous to me because I'm like, why would I? Whatever. So, anyways, you negotiated that they're going to rent back at my mortgage rate, and I think you actually estimated a little higher than it really was.
Doing those conservative things again because I didn't want you to have to pay for somebody else to live in your house. So you made about $250 on the first month's rent.
Yeah, and then I closed on the house and I got a check, so that was nice too.
Yeah.
And then we went and got our marriage license, and then we had Bloody Marys and chicken and waffles.
Yeah.
And then what else did we do? What if it wasn't recording that whole time?